Hey everyone. Hey guys, I'm here. I'm niftynei. I'm here with Jeremy and darosior. Do you play darosior?
Antoine, but yeah, it's fine.
Antoine. We just wanted to do a quick chat about the Mempool stuff and maybe just kind of give some like initial reactions, like what we're thinking about the Mempool,
What is the Mempool stuff? I have no idea what's going on. I was sleeping on the beach.
You were sleeping on the beach. All right. Do you want to explain it, Antoine?
I didn't attend the event.
Okay, so I'll explain it. So all we know is mempool.space offered up this new feature called Mempool Transaction Accelerator, I think, something like that. So I think the general idea, if you watch their video, is you can find a transaction in the mempool. You can click on it using their website, mempool.space. You can click on it. They'll give you the option to pay them some money, money. I don't know how you're paying for it, maybe with a credit card, maybe with Lightning. Somehow you're giving them money. They're going to tell you how much that you need to pay, and then they're going to try and get it into, I guess, whatever block you decide you want to. So what's different about this is normally when you want to make a transaction and pay more money in fees, you have to use like a protocol layer thing to reissue the same transaction or issue a new transaction. So you have to use like a Bitcoin wallet. It's kind of complicated. Sometimes it's not possible to do it using the protocol. So Mempool's offering a service that lets you do it for any transaction. Doesn't matter. I don't even think it matters if you own the transaction or not. You can just pick any random transaction, pay extra money, and then Mempool will do its best to get it into the next block. So I think there's still some questions out. They haven't really addressed like exactly how they're doing it. So
yeah, there's got to be some like behind the scenes like agreements they have with some large set of miners for that to work, right?
Right. Yeah. So we can talk about maybe about how we think they're doing it, and we'll find out when they make an announcement. I think they're making an announcement in a few weeks about how it's working. So maybe we'll talk about how we think it's working, and then like why this is like a thing that people want to do. Like, why would you want to do this? Why can't you just use like what the protocol offers and do it this way? And then maybe like some like I don't know, like reasons why this might be like a bad thing, or why this is like so different and radical for the network in some ways. So I don't remember what my first point that we wanted to share, but like how they might be doing this. Like if you were going to build this service, like how would you make this like work?
It's actually already built into Bitcoin Core, all of the technology that you need to do this. Bitcoin Core has mempool prioritization, where you can add a virtual fee to a transaction and increase its likelihood of being mined in a block template. So Bitcoin Core knew that when you're a miner for yourself, you might want to prioritize your own transactions instead of someone else's. And so it's been a feature, actually, I believe, for quite some time. The difference is just opening behind a gateway that you can prioritize other people's transactions and then communicating that to other people's mempools. It's not meant in Bitcoin Core to necessarily be something that you gossip to other nodes.
I see. So like there's a way that Bitcoin Core lets you like promote one transaction even though it doesn't have any fees attached to it.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it's like already built into Bitcoin Core. So this is what you think they're using to do it. Like, but then they have to communicate that to these miners, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in the way that can work is that if the miners are sending their mempool contents to Mempool, which they are,
okay, then
Mempool can just send them a get block template back and say these are the transactions you should do if you want to be a part of our program.
Do you have anything? Like, does that sound right? Is that how you would make it work?
Yeah, I guess just have an API and prioritize transaction.
Okay. So there's a way to prioritize them?
Like, I think the thing that's important is, like, this service is not technically hard to do, it's socially hard to do.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So, all right. So it sounds like they're just, like, they take some money, they tell people, hey, this transaction is now a priority. I guess, like, if you're someone who's, like, accepting that from mempool.space, then you would also, like, expect to get paid, right? So all of a sudden, like, mempool.space is going to need a way to, in addition to saying, hey, this transaction now is at this, like, fee rate, virtual fee rate, they'd also need a way to, like, send payments to all these people that they're asking for. There's a bunch of different miners, though, right? So they kind of have to figure out how do they know, like, who to pay when they send this, like, virtual thing? It's kind of an interesting question. I'd be curious to see how they're solving that problem. So it's definitely, I think, a problem.
Yeah, well, there are two things that kind of come up to me as like being problematic about this.
Yeah.
One is sort of just the general, like, is this ruining some aspect of decentralization side?
Yeah.
And the other is this enabling pool operators to steal from their constituent miners?
Oh,
Because the constituent miners are seeing lower fees getting in.
Oh.
That's what they're claiming. But then the pool operators, by virtue of saying, if you want to be a part of our pool, you've got to mine this, like, are they actually fairly sharing that revenue?
Right. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh, that makes a really good point, right? Like if you're in a pool mining, you don't have any way to audit how much money they made. You just rely on, we can look at the block and see how many fees are in that. But
you don't know what they really made.
Yeah, if someone else is paying them for it using this virtual transaction.
Yeah, and that's where some of like the Stratum V2 stuff around like miners in pools being able to select their own blocks is kind of a mitigation of that.
Okay.
But that's incompatible with the notion of a third party prioritizing what should be put into your blocks, unless they built it in a way that, just tells you what share of the virtual fee you get, but there's no accountability on what that amount actually is.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So I feel like you're saying that though that Mempool is basically turning into like the block builder then. Like they're the ones that
they're the block proposer. If this proposal goes, far enough along, sort of in a similar way to Flashbots in Ethereum.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing to it, but it existed already. So with some mining pools that already had transaction accelerator, or you could copy paste your transaction and they would basically do that already.
Yeah, I think the difference though is like that one was done by the old one, this old transaction accelerator was built by a mining pool, right?
Yes.
And so when you pay that, you're paying a particular pool, so you know which pool you're paying. Kind of like the pool knows that you're the one paying for that transaction. Whereas like with Mempool, they don't run a mining pool, right? Like we don't know which miners are going to end up getting that money. It's probably like it's an interesting question I think of like how does
and also how much should Mempool earn for this activity?
Right. Yeah.
What's the fair share for them? And is this making transactions overall more expensive for users?
Right.
But feels like you have better control over it, or less expensive?
Right. Yeah. So maybe we should talk about why, so if you're a Bitcoiner and you've got transactions that you're getting mined, why might you use this service that Mempool is providing over the ways the protocol provides, where you can you don't need Mempool to RBF a transaction most of the time, right?
I guess the first most obvious use case that a lot of people have run into is you don't signal for RBF beforehand and your transaction is stuck and you can't replace it with a higher fee.
Right.
So that's one of the most obvious ones. And then you also have you can run into some edge cases that the limitation built in mass default mempool running on the network, where you basically can't replace your transaction anymore, even if it would be more rational for the miner to hear about your transaction if you're trying to practice, but you
can't. Right. So I feel like what this is showing is there's places Mempool is like an auction market to some extent, right? And we've got these rules in the protocol that dictate what the minimum bid to enter into that auction are, right? But there's cases where the rules about what the floor for the next bid are, or even your ability to bid, doesn't exist. The protocol is keeping people who are willingness to pay. There's an intention to pay, but they aren't given the tools in the protocol to do that payment. Right?
Well, a really fun example of that would be, let's say that I request a withdrawal from an exchange and they choose to pay a very low fee rate.
Yeah.
And I'm withdrawing from my cold storage. I don't really have a way to say, please confirm this transaction.
Right.
It might just be pending in a high fear environment for months. And I might say, okay, am I going to go make my cold storage hot so I can do child pays for parent? Maybe that requires me actually traveling around the country or something. Or am I going to go log into Mempool and say I'll just swipe my card and pay them $10 and the transaction goes through?
Yeah.
That sounds way better for a lot of users.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's way more convenient, right? Yeah.
Sponsoring a transaction in a way.
Yeah.
If you will.
You did some work on transaction sponsoring, right, Jeremy? Can you
Yeah.
tell us maybe a little bit what that proposal was? Because that was a protocol level proposal.
Yeah, so it was a protocol level proposal. The idea was that anybody can attach a little bit of extra fee to any transaction they're interested in seeing go through.
Yeah.
And there's a very, very, very small consensus change. The complexity of it actually pretty simple. that enables you to attach these as virtual fees, and it's checked in consensus that the fees can't be just stolen by the miner and not not take the transaction that you wanted.
Yeah, I mean, so it kind of sounds like you were designing like a protocol which basically allows you to do what mempool.space is implemented as like a service, right? Like,
yeah, it was doing this as like a completely peer-to-peer decentralized equivalent service with no middlemen, no special relationships.
Right.
And at the time that I came up with that, it was already the case that you could do stuff like this one-off between pools.
Yeah.
But this kind of democratizes it, puts it in everyone's hands, and doesn't, there's no like special relationship. It's just like if you look at the transactions, this is what you would pick.
And it keeps the auctions like more easy to see. So everyone gets the same data about what people are paying as sponsorship.
Yeah, the fee rate estimations, which is another issue people have brought up, is that if you're trying to make a transaction, trying to figure out how much you should pay, with mempool.space, you're going to underestimate because the things that are going in are actually paying more because they're using the service. So then you'll also get forced to use the service because you won't be able to audit what is actually going in.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Because like currently, like if you're not, so let's like assume that like a lot of transactions that end up in blocks, the visible fee rate doesn't reflect how much they're actually paying. Your wallet isn't going to know how much it needs to like bid to get a transaction in. And if with our current protocol, if you accidentally set it so you can't RBF that transaction, then you unwittingly become a customer of mempool.space because their service made it such that the existing software wasn't able to do it. So you kind of end up on this thing where everyone kind of has to use the centralized service, which now is becoming like the only place that Bitcoin transactions are getting constructed.
Or you've got to use their fee estimator. Yeah. And how do you know that they're being honest with you and not trying to pump up fees because they get a portion of that?
Because they're incentivized to make money from that. Yeah.
And I think let's be clear. Like, I don't think any of us are accusing Mempool of being like bad actors. Like, out to get and destroy Bitcoin, but it's like the thing that they're doing has some pretty nasty effects.
We're talking about incentives, We're talking about the incentives. Like, what are the new incentives that get created by this like service and by sort of information concentration that they're doing?
And also privacy.
Privacy, yeah.
But nothing is preventing any other company to start getting into this business as well. If mempool.space trying to censor some people, some other company could just start providing the service or even mining pools themselves.
Maybe, but do you think it might be like a natural monopoly situation? Because you kind of like, if you're guaranteeing placement in the transaction, if you have two that are equal competitors, then you're getting half the block space.
Well, the real issue here, I think, is not even fee estimation is part of it, and it's actually healing the centralization back to the monopoly and considering even the black propagations that might be hindered because we can't rely on compact blocks anymore if it's used to significant thresholds. It also increases the advantage of large mining pools. They get an advantage by transaction propagation, that by fee estimation, and by if you're a new miner and trying to get into the market, you don't know about all this outside.
The entry for new miners is terrible, right? So all of a sudden, solo miners are fucked, right?
Yeah, unless something like mempool.space signs transactions saying here's how much virtual fee you should do if you want to hit your mempool, but then you're basically giving direct memory access to an external company to like decide what's worth more money in your mempool for relay purposes. And then if you're not a miner signed up with the program and you opt into that for relay benefit, you might not be getting paid for providing the service.
Right.
So it's kind of just makes everything kind of crap.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of ways that this sort of just breaks a lot of natural assumptions we have about like the data in the mempool and what the best next block is going to be, right?
Good news is people are working on fixing the relay of transaction to make it rational for miner, at least more rational.
So what is transaction v3s?
Transaction v3 is the proposal from Gloria and with a lot of input from other people as well. Actually, it's not targeted to everyone. Not everyone should be opting into v3, but the v3 proposal is to opt into a new set of roles for the dust limit in the mempool, so that you could avoid some pinning vectors, pinning being the name of the thing that they talked about at the event, replacing the transaction with a higher transaction
So the way that I kind of understand it is it's setting up a regime where you can opt in to your transactions being able to be accelerated, but that the difference between that and like what Mempool is doing is Mempool is like all transactions are acceleratable.
Right.
Yeah, basically the same thing as signaling for IBF. You need to opt into this before.
Sounds like, I mean, that's going to have a problem in terms of tooling, right? Like the cool thing about what Mempool that space did is that anyone with any transaction can use it. You don't have to worry about like how up to date your transaction.
Yeah, can you use it to do a conflict RBF?
With what?
Like if there's something in the mempool and you have a lower fee RBF, is mempool letting you like do your lower fee RBF with your virtual fee?
These are great questions. I don't know.
Yeah. Like it seems like that's something that they would build if you're like you want to do a revert RBF.
Yeah. I don't know. Great question. Yeah. I feel like, I mean, so my whole thing is like, I don't think this is a package relay problem. I think that I think there's two things here. I think this shows the problem with decentralization of block building, of like block selection. So I had a mailing list posted about 2 years ago now that was basically like, Mempool is obsolete. Mempool is obsolete because you can do this. And the reason you can do this being someone else can someone else can build a relay that figures out what the fee should be and tell the miners, the mining pools, I should say. And the reason they can do that is because there's maybe 10 mining pools, 20 maybe, I don't know, less than 50, that are deciding what the next block is going to be, right? And so as long as you have like a small-ish set of people that they kind of know where the next block is coming from, suddenly you don't have to tell everyone in the network your transaction. You really only have to tell 10 people because they're the ones that are going to be building the next block. So if we really want to make like this sort of service something that isn't possible to do, we need to massively decentralize where those next blocks, who's building the block is coming from. We need to make the mempool relevant again. And what that means is that we need to make it such that you don't know with any like reasonable certainty where the next block construction is going to come from, right? We need to like make it such that lots of people need to get transactions because lots of people.
Well, there's another way of putting that, which is that you can talk about it in terms of indistinguishability.
Okay.
It's not about not knowing. It's about that everybody could come to the same answer at the same time. So then in that way, if everybody is building like a similarly plausible block template, then you wouldn't know, and that's sort of the goal of like rational transaction holding.
The number of parties participating in that, you want it to be big enough that it's beyond a number that you could rationally do an RPC call to with your transaction privately, right? Like you need the mempool as the gossip layer to actually be functioning as a gossip layer and like have enough people that need that gossip information to actually like remove the risk of being able to like just send 10 people a transaction.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I was kind of trying to say is that like the goal of the mempool is to be completely in sync with every other mempool up to speed of light limitations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then if that's the case, then everybody will form the same block
up
to latency issues.
I see. Okay.
And then that's sort of the best for like decentralization. Even it's not really about everybody can pick the block however they want. It's really like, you know, you're just going to rationally pick, and if everybody's rationally picking, they're going to pick the same thing because if they're just paying whoever's paying the most money.
But I think yes, I totally agree with you. I think that's like totally correct about like the mempool construction stuff. But I really do think that like there is this idea of like you need there to be too many people participating.
Yeah, well, it's Stratum. It's like every individual miner should be able to, you know, discriminately pick transactions as they please.
Right.
But it's kind of well, that's a complicated one. Disincentivizing mining pool to switch to Stratum V2 actually. That's your first point. So
it's incentivizing them to switch or to switch away.
No, well, most mining pools didn't switch to Stratum V2 yet, but if they're starting to get into such contracts, they might not want.
Yeah, they wouldn't want to.
Oh. Yeah. Sounds like Stratum V2 should have rolled out a year ago or something, or like, you know, like
it's been out for some time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's always been hard because like I think it's good for the customers, but it's not particularly like good for the businesses. So it's a little bit of like a, you know, there's a difficult balance there. So the incentives just aren't right to like be like this is really going to help you be a better mining pool. It doesn't really increase your revenue.
Right. It's true. No, I think you're totally right. Like, I think the incentives for moving to Stratum V2 aren't amazing, right?
Yeah.
And it's also like, it is more complicated. It's harder. Like, but getting the block building more decentralized is like, I think, good for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
At least like being a project.
But what you were describing, I'm trying to have the mempool. What Jeremy was describing was trying to having the mempool and synchronization across the network is what the Bitcoin Core project has been trying to do for years, and what people are still trying to achieve. It's just hard, but we're working towards it.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that we can solve it without a consensus change.
Yeah, but if you think that like if mempool space like really takes off and it's being used, do you think that means that like we should roll out something like transaction sponsors so that there's like a peer-to-peer open equivalent? It kind of ruins the private side. And it's also been a thing too, just around like Bitcoin being, like don't fuck with my money. Is like if somebody built a business relying on using Bitcoin in a particular way, like doing a consensus change to kill their business is kind of frowned upon. But like this is a case where it's a business that's kind of like screwing over the rest of Bitcoin.
Like this, I think this.
Yeah, that basically is a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think transaction sponsors are cool. Like I said, like the service that Mempool.space rolled out really helps with like problems that I think even transaction V3 doesn't solve, right? Because it doesn't have the protocol breadth to like solve all the problems that.
Yeah. Yes, actually, most people will expect the V3 proposal is assuming that only a small fraction of the Bitcoin mempool users are going to mempool the actual mempool service. Are going to opt into V3, otherwise you can have some very irrational behavior.
Right.
So, and I also think like in terms of complexity, like there is a difference between like a consensus change and like a soft, like a peer-to-peer change. But from what I can tell, like the complexity of V3 is kind of much larger than the complexity of sponsors.
Yeah, but sponsors is consensus change. Nobody can
I agree, like that is like a difference. But like if the mechanism, just looking at the mechanisms, like one is harder to study.
Yeah, but I think among the contributors to the project, there's been this idea that V3 is a short-term solution to pinning for the most pressing issue, which was pinning for Lightning Network and Decentralization protocols. And longer term, we should rethink how we are managing packages and transactions in the mempool. And there's been some work around it recently, so there's definitely people working on it, and it shouldn't be overstated. So it could be a really bad issue with mempool.space, and it could be a non-event. It could be that there is only a very small fraction of users using mempool.space, and we just make the mempool great again before mempool.space is great.
I guess like for me though, I just really don't understand how like package relay fixes like this problem, right? Because like it seems like these problems are just like a little, like package relay seems like a special case that solves existing problems, like some of the Lightning protocol like challenges with the mempool. But I'm really like struggling to understand how that like addresses this issue of like I have a transaction I want to RBF, but the rule 3 on BIP 125 says that I have to pay like an enormous like rate, right? And that's like above my willingness to pay. But mempool.space will like I can pay my willingness to pay and like actually get that transaction in.
Sometimes, well, basically what Lightning wants is what most users would want as well, is just to get the transactions that incentivize the miners the most to get propagated across the networks. That's what users want as well. So you are talking about transaction V3, but you're talking about package relay, and an instance of package relay where it could be useful for wallets, for regular end-user on-chain wallets. It could be that I make an on-chain transaction, the receiver fee spike, receiver of transaction wants to CPFP it, but then the transaction gets evicted from the mempool.
Yeah.
He might want to just broadcast the CPFP charge paying for the fees and the initial transaction at once across the network, and currently they can't do that.
I see.
Well, so another thing that I've also been thinking about for a while is just the concept of having multiple mempools that each have like unique policy domains. and that they can conflict with one another. Right now, the way the mempool is integrated in core, you use like one mempool to actually do the consensus processing. But if you had multiple mempools, you could say like, here is a mempool like fragment that is optimized for like lightning channels, and if you want to submit the mempool, submit it to the lightning channel mempool. It could show up in the other ones as a conflicting thing, but you have same rules that those rules don't need to be the same ones for people like doing an unvault operation from cold storage.
So how do you create templates with multiple mempools?
It's funny because I feel like a few minutes ago we were talking about how every mempool ideally looks exactly the same, and now we're like, but what if we had a variety of mempools?
So those it would still be one logical thing that you can do a block, like a get block template on.
Okay.
The problem would be a little bit harder. You'd say, okay, well, which you could just actually run them as separate things and say which one's giving me the best fee. There's some merge conflict resolution algorithm that you can also apply, and you all still get the same result across. Like if everybody has the same set of like
but
transactions.
it's mostly a relay.
But the idea is that like when you are trying to do like a pinning attack, what you're doing is you're preventing a conflicting transaction from getting in to the point where it causes a security issue.
Right.
And then by having multiple policies, what you're trying to say is that any valid transaction can't be pinned, or is only pinned in one side or the other side at a time.
Right.
It can't be pinned in both is kind of the idea of like you might be worried about being replaced in one, and the other one it's everything can always be replaced, and that's kind of the.
But if it's the same mempool, it comes very close to V3. Then you just opt into a different set of rules for part of your mempool, and the conflict resolution that you're talking about is just something that's part of the.
Yeah, that is what V3 has gotten close to. I think there are some issues I think with how that's set up around like conflicts for like the first transaction in that of like that still can't have a conflict. I don't know if there's a rule that like V3 always takes precedence over V2 if you have a V2 getting replaced by a V3, or if V3s can't replace V2s.
I don't remember that replacements especially, but yeah, basically V3 the rules are very simple. It's just basically you have one transaction in confirmed transaction, you can only have one ancestors in confirmed, one descendant in confirmed, and the descendant can't be more than 10 KB.
Yeah.
It's very constrained. Yeah.
Cool. I think we've been talking a while. Should we wrap it?
I think we should wrap. Yeah.
Last minute. Well, thanks for your time, guys. This is great.
Yeah, well, it's a good idea.
All right, cool. Bye.